Did you know you cannot sue if you get a side effect from the COVID vaccine? Let's talk about it, but first hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so you stay educated on how your money works. If you experience severe side effects from the COVID vaccine provided by Pfizer or Moderna, basically no one is to blame if you get hurt. The feds have granted companies like Pfizer and Moderna immunity from liability if something unintentionally goes wrong with their vaccines. It's very rare for a blanket immunity law to be passed. Pharmaceutical companies aren't typically offered much liability protection under the law. You also can't sue the FDA for authorizing a vaccine for emergency use, nor can you hold your employer accountable if they mandate inoculation as a condition of employment. However, Congress has created a fund specifically to help cover lost wages and out-of-pocket medical expenses for people who have been harmed by a covered countermeasure such as vaccine, but it's difficult to use and rarely pays. They usually compensate less than 6% of the claims filed in the last decade. So let's talk about this immune to lawsuits fiasco. Earlier this year, HHS Secretary Alex Azar invoked the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. The 2005 law empowers the HHS Secretary to provide legal protection to companies making or distributing critical medical supplies, such as vaccines and treatments, unless there's willful misconduct by the company. And this protection lasts until 2024. That means for the next 4 years, these companies cannot be sued for money damage in court over injuries related to the administration or use of the product to treat or protect against COVID. A big reason for this protection is the speed at which this vaccine was implemented. The government is doing this about 4 to 5 times faster than they normally do. And in return, these drug companies want the government to protect them from multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Before the COVID vaccine, the quickest vaccine ever developed was for mumps. It took 4 years and was licensed in 1967. Pfizer's COVID vaccine was developed and cleared for emergency use in 8 months, a fact that has fueled public distrust of the coronavirus inoculation in the US. Roughly 4 in 10 Americans say they would definitely or probably not get vaccinated, but Pfizer and other drug companies continue to reassure the public no shortcuts were taken, since this vaccine was getting approved by all authorities in the world, and that should say something about the vaccine. The legal immunity granted to pharmaceutical companies doesn't just guard them against lawsuits, it also lowers the cost of the vaccine. The government doesn't want people suing the companies making the COVID vaccine, because then manufacturers would probably charge the government a higher price per person per dose. First, you gotta remember, vaccine manufacturers aren't the ones approving their product for mass distribution. That is the job of the FDA. So then the question is, can you sue the US government if you have an extraordinary bad reaction to the vaccine? And again, the answer is no. You cannot sue the FDA for approving or disproving a drug. That's part of its sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity came from the king, the British king, before the American Revolution. You couldn't sue the king, so America has sovereign immunity, and even each state has sovereign immunity. There are limited exceptions, but there aren't any viable legal paths to hold the federal government responsible for a COVID vaccine injury. Then there's the issue with employers. Many businesses serving customers in person or on site are most interested in mandating a COVID vaccine for their employees. It's particularly important for restaurants, bars, gyms, and saloons. While this is also part of a public relations tactic, it's legally within an employer's right to impose such a requirement. Requiring a vaccine is a health and safety work rule, and employers can do that. There are a few notable exceptions. If a workforce is unionized, the collective bargaining agreement may require negotiating with the union before mandating a vaccine. Also, there are anti-discrimination laws provided some protection as well. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, workers who don't want to be vaccinated for medical reasons are eligible to request an exemption. But if none of these exemptions apply, employees may have some legal recourse if they suffer debilitating side effects following a work-mandated COVID inoculation. But there are significant limits or caps on the damages an employee can recover. But then there's some hope. The government has created a way for people to recover some damages should something go wrong following immunization. In addition to the legal immunity, the PrEP Act established the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program, CICP, which provides benefits to eligible individuals who suffer serious injury from one of the protected companies. The little-known government program has been around for a decade, and it's still managed by an agency under HHS. This fund typically only deals with vaccines you probably would never get, like the H1N1 and anthrax vaccines. If a case for compensation through the CICP is successful, the program provides up to $50,000 per year in unreimbursed lost wages and out-of-pocket medical expenses. However, it won't cover legal fees or anything to compensate for pain and suffering. It's also capped at the death benefit of $370,376, which is the most a surviving family member receives in the event that a COVID vaccine proves to be fatal. However, this government compensation program is very hard to use. The bar for compensation is very high. Also worrisome is that the CICP has rejected a majority of the compensation requests made since the program began 10 years ago. Of the 499 claims filed, the CICP has compensated only 29 claims, totaling a mere $6 million. So trust in the vaccine is edgy, to say the least. So what are your thoughts? Did you take the vaccine? Do you plan to take the vaccine? Leave a comment down below and let's get a discussion started. And as always, take care of your money.